Hello, my name is Edward Hall, Hall, and the reason I spell it, so many people can't spell Hall. You'd be surprised at the spellings that I get.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, on October the 28th, 1923.
So how old are you right now?
I'm 96 years old right now.
Do you feel like you're 96?
No, I don't.
Physically, what is it like to be 96?
Well, I think it's great. I'm looking forward to being 100.
And then 196.
That won't happen.
Never know. Now, tell me, Mr. Hall, what specific units were you a part of during your time in World War II?
Well, let's see. Now, I was in a place, Fort Armstrong, which was a quartermaster outfit. And if anybody doesn't know what the quartermasters are, they supply everything that is needed for a soldier to live. His food, his clothing, his bedding, his housing, any utensils that he may need is supplied by the quartermaster to every organization in the Army.
And what was the specific unit, though, that you were a member of?
It was called the Quartermaster Depot at Fort Armstrong, downtown Honolulu, Hawaii.
And you were a part of that unit when the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred?
No, I had transferred out to Hickam Field into a trucking company.
And what was that unit?
That was the 13th Quartermaster Truck Company Aviation. We were under the control of the Army Air Corps.
And what was your specific job in the trucking outfit?
Truck driver.
And so, what was the highest rank you achieved by the time you left the service?
Corporal.
And before we continue, I just want to backtrack. You mentioned you were born in Greenville. Did you grow up there?
No, actually, I grew up in another city called Greenwood until I was 16 years old, when I had some trouble with my father and school. So I dropped out of school and enlisted in the Army with my parents' consent.
Can you talk to me about life during the Great Depression and the struggles that you all faced during the Great Depression years?
Well, I was a kid. During the major part of the Depression, I was only about 5 and 6 years old. So my memory is not too real about what actually happened. I just remember that there was times that I wondered why we didn't have as much food on the table as we had at one time. And I do remember my father being out of work, but not for long. There was one thing about my dad, as I don't know how to put this, but my dad and I never did get along. But my father was a good provider. During the Depression, he was not out of work for very long. Now, one thing that I remember about my dad's work was he worked in a sawmill in 1930-31 for $1 a day, and they worked 5.5 days a week. And he carried his lunch with him, and in the summertime when the fruit was ripe, he would pick blackberries, plums, and these were all wild, bring them home, and Mama would make pies out of them. And that was one of the things that we did. And then my father got a job working for a bakery company, driving a bread truck, which he owned, and he worked as an individual for the bread company. He was like his own boss, did his own thing. He made a decent living, and I must say, as rough as my father was, on me especially, he was always a good provider. We always had a roof over our head, clothes on our backs, and food on the table, although sometimes the food might be a little meager, but we never starved. And my father was a good provider, but he was one heck of a, what's the word I'm looking for, authoritarian, if I put it that way. Man, I got slapped around. I got the lickings you wouldn't believe. I got lickings I deserved, of course, and I got lickings I didn't deserve, and never an apology. If my dad gave me a licking and then found out that he gave me a licking for no reason, well, that goes to serve in case you ever screw up.
Were you the oldest?
No, I had a sister that was almost 2 years older than me.
Were there any other brothers or sisters?
No.
I wonder why he would do that to his only son. That would be...
Well, there was one other one that would have been older than my sister and myself, but he only lived about 2 weeks. As a matter of fact, he was never even named.
Was your father a World War I veteran?
No, but I'd like to tell a little story about that. I have a little joke about it. I always say, well, you know, I served with General Short and Admiral Kimmel, December the 7th, 1941. Now, I put this in, but it's not true. Now, my father my father fought with General Pershing in World War I. My grandfather fought with Teddy Roosevelt, Spanish-American War. And my great-grandfather fought with General Robert E. Lee on the Confederate side in the Civil War. It just seems like my family could never get along with anybody.
You know, you talk about struggling in school, and so you dropped out when you were 16.
Yeah.
What made you want to join the service? Why was that your option instead of getting a job, you know?
Well, I just didn't get along with my dad, and I just thought the only way I'm going to get out of this is to do something else, leave home. But at 16 years old, where are you going to go? So I thought, well, if I can join the Army. So I asked him, I says, how about if I join the Army? And he said, I think that might be a good idea. My name is Edward Hall, and I was stationed at Hickam Field in Hawaii on December the 7th, 1941, when the Japanese surprised us with an attack that devastated the whole island.
And tell me, Mr. Hall, what unit were you a part of on December 7th, 1941?
13th Quartermaster Truck Company, Aviation.
And what was your specific job in that unit?
Truck driver. I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, on October the 28th, 1923.
And if you could tell me the story, Mr. Hall, of how you eventually ended up in the service.
Well, I was a school dropout. I had trouble at school, so I dropped out. My father and I never got along, so in order to get away from home, with his permission and my mother's, they signed for me that I could join the service, and I joined the Army.
And once you joined the Army, where did they send you for induction?
Well, let's see now. I joined on November the 22nd, 1939, and I was sent to Langley Field, Virginia for basic training, of which I was there for about 6 months until they moved me into New York to await transportation to Hawaii.
Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, what did people think about being stationed at Hawaii? That was a pretty good deal, right?
Yeah, that was, when I enlisted, the recruiting sergeant asked me where I would like to serve. Would I like to serve in the United States itself, Puerto Rico, Panama, Alaska, Philippines, or Hawaii? I chose Hawaii, and that's where I was sent.
You mentioned that you were doing basic training in Virginia. That's almost 2 years before the attack on Pearl Harbor. What kind of training was it? You know, did they?
Well, it was just basically close order drill, how to use a gas mask, instructions on the Springfield '03 rifle, instructions on the 1911 semi-automatic pistol and .30 caliber machine gun. And the articles of war were explained to us, drilled into us, and that was about it.
By the time you started basic training, the war had already been declared in Europe.
Oh yeah.
You know, Europe was far away. Did you personally feel like the United States was going to get involved eventually?
Well, yeah, I really did. I felt that sooner or later we would probably get in it. But the biggest reason that I went to Hawaii was at that time there was a movie out, and I believe it was called Blue Hawaii, and it starred Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, and Dorothy Lamour, and it was the movie of the time. Oh, it was a great movie. And I kept thinking about that. So when he said I could serve in Hawaii, that's where I wanted to go. It had nothing to do with my thoughts on the war. My thought was getting away from home, getting another life, and making a career maybe out of the service.
After the training in Virginia, what happens?
Well, they put us on a civilian ship and sent us up to New York City to the Brooklyn Army base, where we waited for about 2 weeks. Then we boarded the Army transport Leonard Wood. Then we sailed down the East Coast, and we stopped in Charleston, South Carolina, picked up some people that were going to go to Panama. Then we stopped in Puerto Rico, let a few people off, picked up a few, went on down to Panama. Now, we didn't get to go. We were supposed to lay over in Panama for a day or two and unload passengers, GIs, and pick up some that were going back to the States for discharge. But the city of Colón in Panama had caught fire a couple of days before, and it destroyed quite a bit of the city, and we were not allowed to go ashore. We had to stay aboard. So the next morning, I believe it was, we went through the canal and then went on up to San Francisco.
What was it like going through the Panama Canal?
Oh, that was fascinating. And they had these little carts they called mules. They would attach a line to the ship and actually pull it through the canal. The ship itself did not push itself through. These little mules did until they got to the other side. Then the engines would kick in and we'd take off. And that was a fascinating thing, to see those huge gates open and close and see that water come in and raise that ship up and then move through and lower it. It was just fascinating. As a matter of fact, it was so fascinating, I went through it again in I guess it was year 2000 or 2001. I made another trip through the canal. I was still fascinated by it.
You grew up in the South. What was it like going to Brooklyn, New York? You know, being up in the North, what was that like for you as someone who had spent his whole life in the South?
Well, it wasn't much different than Virginia as far as the climate was concerned at that particular time, because this was like in the end of March, first part of April. And by the way, we arrived in Hawaii on May 7th, 1940. And when the Japanese attacked on December 7th, 41, I had 6 months left to serve overseas, and I would be going home for either discharge or re-enlistment or whatever I wanted to do. And I had made up my mind I was not going to go back home to live. But fate had it, and I did. But I didn't stay long.
Can you describe, what did you all do on the ship? I mean, that's a long journey from the East Coast all the way through the Panama Canal to Hawaii. How did you occupy yourself?
All we did was lay around on the deck, play cards, and at night they had a movie on board outside with a big screen. Everybody sat on the hatches and watched the movie. And don't ask me what movie, I don't remember.
Now, when you first got to Hawaii, Mr. Hall, what was the unit you were a part of when you first got there?
It was called the Depot Quartermasters. That was the title of the outfit. That's where your mail was sent to, your name, and then Depot Quartermaster, Fort Armstrong, Hawaii. And that was a great post, except I didn't like I didn't like the work I was doing. It was all warehouse stuff, and I just didn't care for it. And I had a friend, he transferred out to Hickam Field Indian Trucking Company, and he and I were pretty good friends, so I followed him out there. And that's where I was when the hell broke loose.
Before we get into that, could you describe what life was like as a soldier in Hawaii before Pearl Harbor?
I always put it this way. I was on a 2-year vacation paid by the government. And actually, that's pretty much what it was. Because before the war started, we carried a pass in our wallet or on our person all the time. And any time after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and what was called recall, the flag was lowered for the night. You were allowed to go downtown, go anywhere you wanted, do anything you wanted, within the law, of course, and be back for reveille, roll call the next morning. Then on Saturday morning inspection, and after 12 noon, you could go to town, do what you wanted to, be back Monday morning for roll call. I mean, it was a great life. We had the most beautiful beaches, the most beautiful weather, the sky, and the surrounding mountains. It was just a gorgeous place.
What about the women?
Well, the GIs didn't fare too well. The women were beautiful. You had the Asian women, of course, which consisted of Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, Koreans, Vietnamese. You had just about every Asian you could think of. And there didn't seem to me to be any discrimination of any kind. Everybody got along beautifully.
What were some of the things that you personally would do in your free time before the war, while you were at Pearl Harbor? Excuse me, while you were stationed in Hawaii?
Well, mostly it was swimming. Every now and then we'd requisition a truck, take a trip around the island, stop at the different beaches. Different outfits would have picnics, especially when the company celebrated their anniversary. They always had a big picnic of some kind, and usually we went to a different beach. It was just a great, great vacation.
What do you remember about December 6th, 1941, the day before the attack? What were you doing? What were your plans for the future?
Oh, I hadn't thought about any plans for the future. My plans were right now, how can I entertain myself? That particular night, that Saturday, I had gone downtown. I loved roller skating. And I went roller skating Saturday night. And Saturday morning that was another story. That was the 7th. But roller skating was my big thing. And we had to do a lot of exercise, physical training, like all kinds of exercise. We could play basketball, baseball, football, tennis, anything we wanted as part of our what they call physical training. Then later on, they had regular programs to keep the men in shape. That was after the war started.
So you were telling me about Saturday, the day before the attack. What were you doing?
Well, we had Saturday morning inspection for one thing, and at 12 noon, you could go to town. As I remember, I went downtown to see a movie, and I came back to the base for the evening meal, and I went back downtown again for roller skating. That's what I did the day before.
And where in Hawaii were you actually stationed?
At that time, Hickam Field.
And for those who don't know, could you explain the location of Hickam Field in relation to Pearl Harbor and Battleship Row?
They were side by side. And today, see, in those days, the services were all different commands. The Navy never conversed with the Army about what they were going to do, and vice versa. Nobody knew. Nobody shared information. That was another problem with the attack. Nobody notified anybody of anything. But today, the Air Force and the Navy are under one command. I don't know the exact title, but the Navy and the Air Corps work together now. There is none of this jealousy. We're going to do this and you're not going to be involved. They all the two units coordinate together as to what should be done. So it's a joint command is what it is. But in those days, the Navy wouldn't tell the Army anything they were doing, and the Army wouldn't tell the Navy.
Before the war, did men from the different services, did you guys hang out with one another, or was it usually just men from your particular unit that you would hang out with?
Oh, we always got along, really. There was a lot of teasing going on. As a matter of fact, the one thing we used to say in the Army was, the Army does all the work. The Navy gets the best pay. And the Marines get all the credit.
And so you're doing great. What I'll have you do, I'll just let you say your memories, but if you could start it off by saying on December 7th, then you can say where you were, what you remember.
All right. In those days, I didn't tell you this before,
Sure.
But since you put it this way, I had taken a job in the mess hall as a permanent KP. Now, all military knows what KP is, but I got paid extra for it because myself and 3 or 4 other guys, we were permanent KPs. We got paid extra, and nobody else had to do it. Of course, they all chipped in and paid. But anyway, that's what we were doing. Now, I'm going to talk about a big mess hall a little later, but right now I'm going to talk about a little temporary wooden mess hall. There was 4 of them right down where our cantonment was, and our mess hall had shut down because we wanted to do some things and redo the mess hall and make preparations for Christmas. So we had moved a air compressor into the dining room because we were going to spray paint the mess hall. And the lumber yard, and one of the artists that we had, he made cutouts of every state in wood, shellacked them, and he put the town and city of where each member of the organization was from. Like my being from South Carolina and from Greenwood, he put a little dot there where Greenwood would be and put the name. And he did that for every state of every guy that was from a state. So we were going to put those up. So in the meantime, our main stove was shut down, and we had a field stove that we would cook for ourselves. So on that particular morning, and I went into the mess hall, my friend Alex says, "Ed, you know that first sergeant and all his cronies, they must have been in here last night." Because see, we had plenty of food in the walk-in refrigerator and in the storeroom. They messed up every doggone pan in the place, especially the frying pans. He says, "Clean us a frying pan. I'll start the field stove, and I'll start the air compressor. And we'll have breakfast, and we'll go to work." Well, he started the field stove, he started the compressor, and I'm cleaning a skillet, and all of a sudden, poof! What is that, the air compressor acting up? And then I hear another thump, a little bit louder. And I looked around at that thing again, no. And then I heard explosions like you wouldn't believe up the street to my right. I ran to the back door, and I looked to my right, and I saw Hangar 7 and 9 blowing up. Planes flying everywhere. And then here come one straight across at me, kicking the asphalt up on the tarmac of the taxi strip across the street, coming straight at me. He was so low on the ground, he had to pull up to miss the building I was in, which was only about 15 feet high, and he had to pull up to miss it. While pulling up, he quit firing. That was the only thing that saved my life. He was coming straight at me.
Say that again?
He was coming straight at me firing, but he had to pull up to miss the electrical wires and the building I was standing in. And that was the only thing that saved my life at that moment.
When did you realize who was attacking?
Well, right then and there, when he pulled up, and I saw that red ball. And another thing, when he pulled up, he banked to his right, which his left, well, the cockpit, he was looking straight at me and I was looking at him, the pilot. And this only happened, just a flash. It happened quicker than I can tell it. We were looking at each other, he smiled at me, and that was it. And I thought, you son of a gun, you're having a ball, aren't you? And you're scaring the hell out of me. Well, you want me to go on? Well, from there, I ran outside. I couldn't believe that this was happening, but I knew it was. And I'm standing outside, I'm still looking around. I'm bewildered. Some guy reaches out, grabs me by the shoulder, pulls me under the eave of the building, and he says, "Are you trying to get yourself killed, you idiot?" And it wasn't 2 seconds later, here come another strafing, and he took off about 2 inches of the edge of that eave that we were standing under. That was my lifesaver number 2. So then I says to myself, to heck with this KP crap, we're not feeding anyway. I'm going back to the motor pool, see what I can do to be of help. But I know things are just absolutely being destroyed. But I got to the motor pool. Oh, by the way, another thing, on the way to the motor pool, see, all of this happens quicker than I can tell it. But on the way to the motor pool, I saw the damnedest explosion from Pearl Harbor. Because, as I said, we were right next door to it. Well, I didn't know what it was, but I found out later that was the Arizona that blew up.
What did it look like?
Oh, man, it was the biggest ball of fire and smoke you could ever imagine. And I had no idea what had happened. I thought, well, maybe it was ammunition dump or something. Yeah. But anyway, I continued on in the motor pool, and the only truck that was left was a pickup. So I was told to take the pickup and go up Hanger Avenue and do what I could. Now, Hanger Avenue was exactly what it was. All the hangars were on the left side. Buildings were on the right side. Go up Hanger Avenue and see what you can do to help. Well, nobody bothered me until I got up by the big barracks. The big $1 million barracks that housed 3,200 men. And this guy comes running out, flagged me down. Turned out he was a medic. And he says, come with me, take your keys so nobody will steal your truck. Come with me, we got wounded, we got to get them to the hospital. So I went into the building with him and we wound up with 4 guys. 2 of them could sit, and we had to lay 2 of them on the floor and get them to the hospital. And then we went back looking for more wounded. Well, we did this for the next closer to 4 hours that we picked up wounded. And I think one of the most grisly scenes I saw was there was this one guy laying there, and I went to check him out. And I rolled him over on his back, and as I did, his intestines fell out of his stomach. That was a gruesome sight. Well, the rest of the wounded didn't bother me as much as he did. But that's what we did for the next 3 or 4 hours.
What do you remember about some of the other wounded men and what their injuries were?
Oh, it was the usual things, chest wounds, shoulder wounds, arms blown off, broken legs. Oh, God. It just kind of gets to me. It was one horrible day, all those wounded and all those that were killed. Now, we found the dead one. We didn't pick him up. He was beyond help anyway. So he was later, and we picked up the dead later. And then along about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were shuffling in bigger trucks. The more seriously wounded who had been stabilized, we took them down to Triple General Hospital, which was down at Fort Shafter. And then that night, I was back in my pickup truck again. Oh, I didn't tell you this part. We were strafed again, the medic and I don't know how this happened, but the bullets came through the center of the truck tore out the back window and the windshield and bullets through the roof. But neither one of us got hurt. We didn't even get cut from the glass flying. That was number 3 that I went through that could have killed me. I was very fortunate. I was very lucky that day. Now, a little amusement thing. I spoke of the big barracks a while ago. The big barracks was a centrally located huge mess hall and dining room with 9 different wings attached to it. And each wing was 3 floors high and no air conditioning. But the windows only had screens, there were no glass. And within the building, we had a barber shop, we had a first aid unit that was open and manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had a tailor shop, we had a dry cleaners, we had a post exchange branch. We didn't have a post office. The post office was over by the main post exchange. But I had a friend slept on the 2nd floor, and he was walking guard duty that morning, or he was corporal of the guard, over in Hangar 9, I believe it was. Well, anyway, his bomb, or his bid, was a victim of a direct hit. That is, the window sill by his bid. Of course, the whole thing was blown to smithereens. But he was not hurt. Well, let me put it another way. He said he was blown halfway across the hangar when that bomb hit that destroyed that hangar, or a couple of bombs, whatever it was. But then I lost him at the Battle of Midway. His B-17 never made it back from the battle, so we lost him. And then I lost 2 fairly good acquaintances, and 1 very good acquaintance that we served together in Langley Field recruit camp. And all 3 of them were killed that day. Let's see, Leland, what was his last name? Leland, can't think of it. And then there was Ernest, and then there was Robert Kelly. The other 2, I can't remember their last names, but I guess I'm fortunate I remember their first names. But anyway,
all 3 of them were killed at Pearl Harbor.
They were all killed on the Hickam field that day.
Do you know what caused their death?
No, because I never saw the bodies, and I never inquired. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know they were lost until, I guess a couple of weeks later, when things kind of died down a little bit. I went looking for them, and then I was told that they were killed that day. I had no idea they were gone. And it was so heart-touching to lose 3 people that you know, and then lose the 4th one at the Battle of Midway. It was really a bad situation. But now I spoke of the dining room, and I wanted to impress upon the people that are seeing this. That dining room was so huge, you could put 6 regular size basketball courts in it. That's how big that dining room was. And those people in the kitchen, there was, I can't remember if it was 4 or 6 that ran into the walk-in refrigerator at the big barracks kitchen, and they were killed by a 500-pound bomb that landed on top of the walk-in refrigerator. Now, they did not have a mark on them. They were killed by concussion. And that was another tragedy. And the kitchen itself, they had the hugest pots you ever saw in your life to cook different meals in, like stews or cream of wheat or stuff of that nature. All kinds of vegetables, everything. They were huge. And we had 4, no, I believe it was 6. It was either 4 or 6 cafeteria lines that kept the food warm as the guys went through to get their food. It was one huge kitchen, but it was destroyed completely, and so was the dining room. They did repair the dining room, and they used that for a movie theater, because we didn't really, the little movie theater we had was not adequate. See, the field was not complete yet. I do believe there was supposed to be, let's see, hangar 2, 4, 6, 8. I believe there was supposed to be, like 8 more hangars. Because here's the way it was laid out. The control tower was on the hangar side, of course, and that was called Building 1. Then there was hangar 3 and 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17. And I believe that was it on that end. Now, on the other end, on the other side of the tower, was hangar 2 and 4, which had just been completed and was straight across the street from that mess hall that I was in. And it was bombed and strafed. But it, evidently, the bomb actually never hit the hangar. It hit the outside, the ramps, and that. The guy was a lousy shot. But anyway, there was supposed to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. And I believe that's all it was going to be. I don't know that for a fact. Now, that's my own ideas, because they did build hangar 2 and 4. And there was talk about the rest of the hangars, but I don't know for a fact if they were going to be built or not. Of course, they never were.
Could you please tell me about what you remember regarding the men fighting back at the Japanese planes? Did you see any of the American planes taking off? Was there any anti-aircraft fire?
No, I didn't see any of that. I was too busy. The only thing I can tell you about the fighters getting off, we had about 6 fighters got off from Wheeler Field, which was the fighter base, and then there was a little auxiliary field called Haliva, and there were some P-40s stationed over there. And that's where, let's see, there was Taylor and Welch, Remington, I can't think of the others. There was about 6 of them that got off. Now Taylor and Welch, they each shot down 4 Japanese. And between the anti-aircraft fire from the Navy and the Army, we shot down a total of 29 planes. But you know, the one thing I couldn't understand was all those Japanese planes flying around that base, why some didn't crash into each other, because they were flying every which way you could think of, with the machine guns going and bombs falling. Of course, Navy got it the worst. They got it the worst. And then the one thing that, when I went back to Hawaii one time, I went back before the Arizona Memorial was finished. And we had to take a little cruise ship, or boat, from Kewalo Basin, downtown Honolulu. And it took us out into the ocean, past Honolulu Harbor, into Pearl. Now this little excursion ship, boat, whatever, they had permits to do this. So they took us around to all the different ships that were damaged and sunk that day, and they saved the Arizona for the last. And the commentator on the boat, he was also describing what happened. And he got to the Arizona and he talked about how it was sunk. And then he said, you know, the Arizona, there was 1,177 men killed instantly that morning. And the Arizona, even though she lays at the bottom of Pearl Harbor, has never been decommissioned. And she never will be, because you see her crew is still aboard. Referring to the 1,177. And that gets me every time I talk about that. I choke up on it. I choke up a couple of times, but that one really gets me. I'll never forget that man's statement.
And because it was a Sunday, most of the officers aboard the ships, they had their own residences off of the ship, and so the majority of those 1,177 were the 18, 19-year-olds.
I think most of them, well, they had they had a band concert the night before, and I think the Arizona won either first or second, whatever, but the whole band was killed. I think there was 30-some in the band. Every one of them was killed. As far as the officers are concerned, Admiral Kidd was killed. A couple of 3 captains were killed. But all I can tell you, I don't know about the officers in the Navy. All I know is what I read. I don't know anything firsthand about the Navy.
You're doing wonderful. I really appreciate you opening up. This is really, historically, this is great, because people are going to be able to watch this 200 years from now, and they'll still get to understand what you experienced.
Well, I hope so.
I just have some questions, if that's okay. During the attack, I understand that you were busy taking care of the casualties, but could you put me in your shoes and describe the noises that you're hearing throughout the attack. What are the different type of noises?
Well, it was mostly the rat-a-tat-tat of the machine guns, our own explosives of anti-aircraft, and of course the bombs. And every time you hear a bomb, of course you cringe, you know. Sometimes you even hit the dirt. Why, I don't know, but I guess it was just natural instinct to think if I hit the ground I won't get hurt. But a lot of people did. Shrapnel, that was, you know, the shrapnel was about as big a danger as the bullets themselves. And of course, I've never been able to understand why I didn't get hit. But I'm glad I didn't.
You mentioned those 3 close calls you had. Were there any other close calls?
No. The only other close call I had was kind of comical in a way. And that night, running messages, I had to go up to Schofield Barracks. And the messenger, we delivered his messages, and we were on our way back. And we were still on the property of Schofield Barracks. And all of a sudden, my passenger said, stop, there's a challenge. I said, what do you mean? I didn't hear anything. And then I hear it, guys, stop and be recognized. What the hell? Oh, we were challenged. I didn't hear him say halt, but my passenger did. Otherwise, we'd have been shot. So, if you want to call it a close call, I don't know. But
if you could elaborate, what were the tensions like after the attack that night, December 7th, the night?
Oh, God. Well, actually, the only sleep I got was in the front seat of my truck, which, by the way, I had acquired by now. Oh no, that was the next day. I got my big truck back, and so I slept in the truck. I never saw a bed for about 4 days. I slept cat naps in the truck when it was being loaded and unloaded. And we lived off of hardtack and water well, I didn't have a meal, I think, for about 3 days. We lived off of that hardtack and water. But you didn't think too much about it because you were so doggone busy all the time.
In the days after the attack,
Yeah.
What were you busy doing?
Oh man, we were cleaning up the bays, resupplying everything that had been destroyed as much as we could, hauling wreckage away, and it was. I must have did 100 different jobs. Well, when I say 100 different jobs, driving the truck, I participated in so many different jobs because it was such that base was such a mess. When those Japs got through with it, the guardhouse was blown apart, the fire station, prisoners escaped, but they didn't go anywhere. They turned to and helped the fire department fight fires. Most of them were just people who had minor infractions, like being drunk on duty or absent without leave and got caught up with, or some kind of mischief, nothing serious. So when the guardhouse was blown apart and they all got out. They returned to duty.
During the attack on Pearl Harbor, my understanding is that there were 2 waves of the attack.
Oh yeah.
What do you remember about the distinction between the 2 waves? What was the difference?
Well, the only thing that I can think of, there was quite a lull. There was about a 20-minute lull, half-hour lull. I'm not sure just how long, but we thought it was over. And then somebody says, "Oh shit, here they come again." And I looked up and there was these high-altitude bombers. They were way up. As I remember, there was no strafing the second time. Not at Hickam anyway. But those big bombers up there, well, high-altitude bombers, they weren't necessarily huge because they wouldn't be able to get off of the ship. But you could see them, they were way up. And you could see the bombs when they fell, little tiny dots. But they were after the Navy. They weren't after us anymore. I guess they figured they'd knocked out all the airplanes, and which they had. They destroyed Wheeler Field, and they destroyed about 90% of the airplanes on the ground. And that was due to the fact that our General Short wanted them all lined up, wingtip to wingtip, supposedly to protect them from sabotage. Well, when I heard this, some weeks later after the attack, I thought to myself, and he's a general? Now, before this started, we just came off of maneuvers on Thursday, and the airplanes were all scattered all over the base, different directions. So they couldn't be strafed all at one time. I thought, why would he do that? To guard the plane, leave the plane crew out there with the airplane. He's a general, he's supposed to know what he's doing.
Where was Wheeler Field in relation to Hickam?
About 12, 15 miles north.
So you didn't see Wheeler Field at
Oh,
all?
no.
Were there planes stationed at Hickam?
The planes at Hickam, they were mostly all bombers.
And what do you remember about the destruction to the planes at Hickam Field?
Well, until after the attack was over, you couldn't see anything because you're too darn busy, and all the planes were on the other side of the hangars, or in the hangars. So you couldn't see that. You couldn't see any damage from where I was to speak of. So.
But I'm sure you saw it after the attack.
Oh, I helped clean it up. Oh, yeah.
So what do you remember about that?
No, destruction everywhere. Airplane parts fleeing everywhere. Planes burned, destroyed. Yeah, it was, oh yeah, that was a mess.
And what do you remember about the smoke? The smoke from all the explosions, particularly the fires aboard the ships. How did that affect you?
Well, I don't know how to say that it affected me. All I could think of was, my God, look at the smoke everywhere. That's all I could think of. I knew that there was bad damage under all that smoke. But again, you know, when you're busy doing things, you don't really pay too much attention to that kind of stuff, you're paying attention to what you're doing. And it's kind of hard to give an idea of just exactly how you felt, or did you think of it? Yeah.
You mentioned that first wave when the Japanese fighters were attacking. You didn't understand how they were not hitting one another. There were so many of them.
Yeah.
What did it look like to you? How many at the time? Not what you read later, but at the time when you just looked up and you saw all these planes, how many would you think at the time?
I would say anywhere from 15 to 30.
And they were all just going around?
Yeah. And then when you look over at Pearl Harbor, it was even more.
Well, those were just the planes over Hickam.
Yeah.
And was it very often that they would come down and strafe? Different.
Oh, yeah.
So could you elaborate on that a little more? If you could say the Japanese planes.
Oh, my goodness. I don't know how to explain it. They were just everywhere you looked.
But that was perfect what you said, but could you say the Japanese planes instead of they?
Oh, yeah, the Japanese planes were just everywhere. No matter where you looked, all you could see was Japanese planes. Now, and I didn't see these, because this story came out after the attack. I didn't even know they were coming in. There were those 12 B-17 bombers coming in from California that morning. And of course, they caught it. And we had one landed on the golf course out on the north side of the island. We had one landed at Bellows Field, which had a real short runway, and they ran off the runway into the ocean, and I think the plane was saved. They were all saved. A lot of them crash landed. One was supposed to have landed at Wheeler Field, but nobody ever saw it. But anyway, there was a lot of mysteries going on that day. All these rumors were going on. Oh God, the rumors.
Tell me about the rumors.
Can you believe, even at 18 years old, I knew better than this. There's paratroopers. Well, how are you going to get paratroopers when you need a big plane to carry the paratroopers, and they can't take off of an aircraft carrier? Now, we knew they were from aircraft carriers. That's the only place it could have been from. So how could a plane that could carry paratroopers take off of an aircraft carrier? Well, and then we had landings all over the islands. Now that was plausible. They could have had transports, and they could have had landing barges. And that was a strong rumor, and that bothered us a lot. But when nothing happened, we were relieved very much.
What did you all feel about the civilian population? A lot of them were first-generation Japanese.
Well, actually, I personally didn't think anything about it. Not at all. I never even thought about them might take up arms. Never even crossed my mind, because everybody got along so good.
You talked about picking up all those casualties. You mentioned the first 4. 2 of them could sit, 2 of them you had to lie down. Those first 4 wounded men?
The what?
You were talking to me about the casualties, and the first 4 you picked up, 2 of them could sit, and 2 of them you...
Oh, yeah.
So what were those men's injuries? Were they burned, or what happened to them?
No, the two that could sit, they had shoulder wounds, as I remember, from the back. And the guys that were laying down, I think one of them had a stomach wound and the other one had a chest wound. But I don't remember exactly what it was.
And you mentioned that story about turning over one of the men.
Yeah.
With the intestines.
Yeah.
Was he killed, or did you still help him?
Oh no, he was dead. As a matter of fact, he had a .45 automatic pistol on him, and I took the pistol because he didn't need it. And of course, the belt was full of blood, but I never cleaned that belt. I let the blood dry, and I kept it. I kept it all through the war, and I wanted to bring it home, but no, it belongs to the government. You can't take it. So I didn't get to take it, but I carried it through the whole war.
Did you know that man personally?
No, he was I can't even remember for sure if he was first or second lieutenant. I think he was first, but I can't be sure. That's been so long ago.
And was that the... I'll come back to that later, but you had mentioned that, you guys are picking up all these wounded, and where were you taking the wounded?
Say again?
Where were you taking the wounded?
Oh, to our little local hospital.
There must have been a lot of people from a lot of places going to there.
As I remember, all we did was pull up to the back of the hospital, and we, at first, we got them into emergency room, and then we had to lay them in the hallways. Then we had to lay them on the porches, and we even had some laying out in the yard. And we had so many, the hospital couldn't take care of them. And the doctors were running around trying to check the more seriously to take care of them first. Some guy with a little arm wound or something, hell, he can wait. Yeah.
As you were dealing with these wounded men, as you were putting them on the truck and bringing them to the hospital, what kind of things would they say? What was their attitude?
Well, we had a few of them were crying. Some of them were screaming with pain. And some were cursing like mad. And I was along with them with the cursing.
How many trips would you say you made back and forth
Oh, good
to
God.
the hospital?
That would be a guess. I have no idea. It was run, drop them off, run back, pick up some more, run in, drop them off. I have no idea. Like I said, we worked from like about 8:20 when I met up with this guy. It had to be about 8:20. And we worked until 1:30, 2 o'clock, picking up wounded, bringing them in, and trying to help him being a medic. When we'd get wounded there, some doctor might ask him, do this, do that. Well, I might have to wait for him. So that might take 15, 20 minutes for him to help the doctor or whatever. It was one busy day. And I thought, when is it going to stop? Well, I'll give you some figures now. I think I got this right. And the whole total Army Air Force that day, there was 200, I think it was 248 killed. 123 of them were at Hickam, and the rest were scattered at Wheeler and Bellows. Well, Bellows only lost, I think, 2 or 3 men, because it was a very small base. They only had about 150, 200 people out there altogether. So, and they only had 1 or 2 bombs that dropped. They got strafed mostly, because the Japs knew it wasn't a very important base. Oh, we're speaking about what the Japs knew. Here's one for you. When the base was built, they were going to put the aviation gasoline storage over on this side of the main street in Hickam. They're going to put the gasoline storage over there. They're going to put a ball field over here. Well, somebody said, hey, wait a minute. The hangar line and the flight line is over here. Why don't we move the fuel over here, move the ball field over there? So that's what they did. And the Japanese had some misinformed maps. And they bombed and destroyed the ball field. And only one small bomb fell in the aviation area, and it hit the driveway, and it only punched a hole in the concrete about 1 foot deep. So we got a laugh out of that.
You mentioned picking up all those wounded. Where would you find them, Mr. Hull?
Where what?
Where would you find all these wounded men?
Oh, they were laying everywhere. A lot of them, a good deal of them, were on the parade ground. And of course, inside the barracks, where the bombs had hit, and the shrapnel got them, or the, shrapnel, or flying frames of the windows, because we had no glass. We had no glass in the windows. We only had screens. But material from the building, concrete, stuff of that nature.
Did you have a litter with you?
No. We picked them up and carried them bodily. Now, we had a few that could walk, like guys with a shoulder wound or a leg wound. He could walk or hobble. You know, we could get him to the truck. But no, we didn't have any. Well, we did take one. We took one litter. That's all we could get in the pickup. Well, we could have got 2, but we just took the one. That's all we had was 1 litter.
And how many men, how many wounded men would the truck hold before you would bring it back to the hospital?
No, usually maybe 2, because it was only a pickup.
Sure.
And if they couldn't sit up, we had to lay them on the floor. So you couldn't get more than 3 at the very most. So that's why it took us a while to get all the wounded. Of course, we only had 3 ambulances on the field, actual ambulances, and they were running all over, just like us. Well, here again, they could only put 2 or maybe 3 in the ambulance.
So you guys were pretty much a converted ambulance.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about who was your commanding officer before the attack, and once the attack happened, did your officer have any kind of control or order, or was he giving any?
Never even saw the man.
Who was he?
I think his name was Sparrows, I think his name was. The captain. I knew it started with an S anyway. I think it was Sparrows. That's about all I can remember of him. We had a big fat first sergeant. His name was Jacobs.
He's the one who dirtied all the dishes, right?
Huh?
He's the one who got all the dishes dirty?
Yeah. Yeah, him and his cronies.
So, you're 18 years old. Without a commanding officer, how did you get the initiative instead of running and hiding in a hole?
Oh, hell, man, that never even occurred to me.
Could you explain your thought process of how you're in a situation where you're under fire, but yet you want to help people?
Oh, sure, just as exactly. I was a truck driver, basically. I wanted to do my job. I knew transportation was going to be needed, so that's what I did. And people, I have friends that they all think I'm a hero. And hero, what the hell are you talking about? Everybody was a hero that day. If you want to have a hero, we all did what we thought we had to do to take care of things. And that's what we did. Like the one fella, he, how can I say it? Well, all I can say is I happened to look around, and here was the same mess hall. This was a little later. As a matter of fact, that's when I drove by with the pickup. Here was a guy up on the roof putting a fire out on our mess hall roof. So, everybody jumped in and did what they had to do. That's what you did on an attack like that. The same way with the guys in the Navy. They all did their job as best they could. And that's what we did.
I really appreciate you taking the time. We're almost through. I just have a couple more things. Could you, I have some more things about Pearl Harbor, but we'll come back to that. If you could just continue with your story, what did you end up doing after the attack on Pearl Harbor? How did you spend the rest of the war?
Well, as a truck driver, until I transferred into the Air Force itself, I still drove a truck, and I still hauled material for whoever and wherever I was dispatched to serve. Like one day, I was given, I got to the motor pool a little bit late that morning. Not that I was late for work, just late. And dispatcher says, well, what are we going to do with you today? Oh, I know what we're going to do with you. You'll take that personnel carrier out there, and you go up to headquarters building, and you report to the payroll officer. Okay. So I go up there, and I report to him, and he says, where's your truck? I says, out in the parking lot. Well, we can't have it out there. Drive it around and back it in the front door here. Okay. So I did that. And as I backed up, here come two cars out with submachine guns. And after them, here come four more guys carrying great big boxes. Well, this was sometime after the attack, and quite a ways after. But it was the payroll for the guys down in the New Liberty Islands. And they were loading the payroll on the truck, taking it over to the airplane, put it on the plane, and fly it down to the New Liberty Islands. So things like that, anything that needed to be moved, that was our job as a truck driver. Now some truck drivers, they had it neat, in one sense of the word. Like I remember one guy, his truck set up by the quartermaster clothing warehouse every day, all day, hardly ever moved. Me, I was fortunate enough to get signed different places. We go downtown quite often, pick up I remember one time I went down, had to report to the officers club, and the staff sergeant comes out, and he says, all right, let's go downtown to such and such place. And I said, I can't remember the name of that place. But anyway, it turned out to be a whiskey warehouse or sales warehouse. Anyway, we go down there. Yeah, we loaded my 2.5-ton truck with cases of liquor piled to the roof, front to back. We started out, and we got to this one little hill downtown Honolulu, and a stoplight. Stopped for the red light, and went to take off. Damn truck raised up. Front wheels came off of the pavement, but it settled down overnight. But I had to laugh about that. Then we, of course, went to the officers' club, unloaded, and crap like that, you know. And I was fortunate that I got a lot of jobs like that. Go downtown, and everybody loved the downtown trip because you get to see all the gals. And oh yeah. So after things quieted down, yeah, we got back to somewhat normal. It was good.
So were you stationed at Hickam Field for the rest of the war?
No. I transferred again up to Wheeler Field, and then they asked for volunteers for people that were needed on a place called Canton Island. And I said, where's Canton Island? And it's about 500 miles south of the equator. Oh, well, that sounds like that could be. So I volunteered. And then that was a mistake as far as I was concerned.
Why?
Well, I got down there, it was just a desolate transit island. And it was a stopover for all the airplanes traveling from the States, which stopped in Hawaii. Now they stop at Canton, refuel, fly on to Australia or New Guinea or wherever, down that area. And that was the loneliest place in the world.
Not many women.
And it was all white coral. And you better not get caught with a shirt off or no sunglasses. Court-martial offense if they wanted to press it.
Why with the sunglasses?
Well, you ever been in the snow in the bright sun? Same thing.
It blinds you.
It would have an effect on your eyesight sooner or later. So you're required to wear sunglasses. I remember one day I had my shirt off, and the commanding officer came by and he saw me, and he stopped me, and man, he chewed me up one side, down the other, about my shirt being off. I thought maybe he's going to court-martial me. but he didn't. He just chewed me out, made me put it on.
And did you spend the rest of the war on that island?
No. No, my mother came down ill, and my sister, she didn't do things properly. She wrote me a letter which took about close to 2 weeks to get to me, telling me that Mother had a relapse of her stroke. And so I go down to the Red Cross and inform him. Now you see, if my sister had went to the Red Cross at home, they could have handled it right there and got me an emergency furlough to come home. But she didn't know that. So she wrote me a letter. And I went down to the Red Cross, and the guy says, yeah, we can handle that. So he says, we probably won't hear anything for 3 or 4 days, though. And okay, because it's all done by radio. So after 3 or 4 days, I went down there and I asked him about it. And he says, what are you talking about? Son of a bitch set it aside and never sent the message.
And that's when you punched him, right?
And who you betcha. So to this day, I will not donate to the Red Cross. But
so what happened?
Now, my commanding officer, I told him about it, and he says, "Well, wait a minute. My God," he says, "you've been overseas a long time." I says, "Yeah, about 3.5 years now." And he says, "Well, you're eligible for regular furlough."
Hang on 1 second, sir.
So after the Red Cross did not do their job, I went to my commanding officer, told him the story, and he told me that I had enough time overseas for regular furlough. But he would have to send me back to Hawaii to apply for the furlough. He could not give me one there. So he had me flown back to Hawaii. I put in for furlough, and I went home for 30 days. Of course, I had to use traveling time cross-country out of my furlough, which cut it down. But anyway, I got home to see Mama, and then I had to go back to Hawaii. And from there, I was sent down to the Marshall Islands in Kwajalein for another 6 months, and I was rotated back to the States for reassignment, and that's where I spent the rest of the war.
What was it like to see your mom and your family again?
Well, Dad had changed a lot. He was happy to see me, and of course Mother, she was happy, but she was invalid. She could slide out of the bed into her chair, and she could work her way back into the bed, but she could not really stand up. And it was, she had 2 strokes. She had one just before December the 7th, and I was notified of it right after the 7th. And here again, there was no furloughs, period. So I thought, well, what if she dies? But there was no way to get me home. So I didn't get to go home. But she recovered. That is, she did not pass away. She laid invalid all these years, and she finally died in, I think it was December, no, it had to be March of 48. Oh yeah, she died in March of '48 because I had left home, went to New York.
Were you close to her?
Well, I was closer to her than I was my dad. That was another funny thing. I hate to say this, but it's true. My mother and father were not very affectionate people, especially my father. The only time in my life that I remember my dad putting his arm around me was when I came home on furlough and had to go back. And he took me to the train station and he gave me a hug and he gave me a $20 bill and he had tears in his eyes. And that's the only time I ever remember my father being the least bit sentimental. Ever. The only time I ever remember him being sentimental ever in my life.
You must have not known what to do. You must have been so surprised.
Yeah, I was. Especially with the $20. He was not one to part with money.
I think maybe he realized after Pearl Harbor how close he came to not having a son.
He didn't realize that I never told him.
What do you mean?
I never told him anything about what I did.
But he must have known you were there when the attack happened.
Oh yeah, he knew it. I think he did say something one day, that must have been a pretty rough deal. And I said, yes, it was. But that's about all that was ever said. He never asked me what happened. He never asked me, did I get hurt? Nothing. My dad was a strange man.
Do you have kids, Mr. Hall?
Huh?
Do you have children? Do you have kids? Do you have children?
Oh, yeah, I have one son.
Is he local? Your children, are they close by?
No, he'll be 76 years old, comes the 2nd of October, and he lives in San Antonio, Texas. And I only see him about once every 3 to 5 years.
That's it?
Yeah. He'll come up every now and then and visit. He'll come up and stay 4 or 5 days, and we'll catch up on things, and he'll go back.
Do you have grandkids or no?
Huh?
Do you have grandkids? Grandchildren?
Oh, yeah. I have one granddaughter, and she has 1, 2, 3, 4. She has 5 children.
Okay, that's good. The family tree is getting bigger.
Yeah.
Larger. But if your son's 76, that means he was born when you were 20.
Or 21, somewhere along there.
Right after you came home from the war.
Well, he was born in 1945.
What's the story of his mother? How did you meet your wife?
Oh, I met her at home in Greenwood. We both came out of the theater at the same time, and she was such a pretty girl. I had to get to know her. And I approached her, and we talked for a minute, and I escorted her home. And then we started dating. And that's when I had come back from overseas for reassignment. And we got married. And then we divorced about 3 years later. That's the way things go.
I'm sure you're a ladies' man over here.
Huh?
I said, I'm sure you're a ladies' man over here.
Me? Where'd you get that idea?
I'm just, I don't doubt it.
No, I'll tell you honestly, there is 2 or 3 women around here that would like to get better acquainted with me, but I don't want any part of another woman.
I don't know. It might be nice to have a companion.
Well, that would be nice too, but then I have a stepdaughter here, and she just called the other night, and she's concerned about me and my medical problems, which right now are no problem, but every now and then things flare up, and she wants me to move in with her. Well, with her and her husband, and I really don't want to. And yet I kind of need somebody to kind of look after me. You know, in case anything happens at night, you know, to
Well,
get me to the hospital or whatever.
This is a pretty nice place.
Yeah, it is. And I have a nice little apartment, and that's the only thing I'm concerned about is, do I lock the doors at night, or do I leave them unlocked in case of an emergency? The rescue squad has to come in.
I'm sure they would open it somehow.
Oh yeah, they'd break the window or whatever.
What advice do you want to give to future generations?
Get a good education, as best an education that you can get, and pay strictly attention. And I know this is a hard thing to say because the schools are not teaching history today, they're not teaching geography, and it's a shame. I don't know about the rest of the nation, but the state of Nevada seems like it doesn't give a damn about geography, education, especially history. I think every child in this country should know how this country was founded, how it was discovered, the fight that was fought for freedom of everything that you can think of, the freedom of where you want to go, the freedom of what you want to do, the freedom of speech, the freedom of justice. There is just so much to learn that is not being taught today. Children, please get an education. Demand that you are allowed to study history and geography and how this government is run, and participate in the running of this country and make it a great country that has been for many, many years. Today, I'm a little worried about it, but I don't have to worry too much longer. My life is coming to an end, and I won't have to put up with it anymore. God bless all of you, and God bless America.
Well, you know, Mr. Hall, I interviewed someone that's 110 recently. So you got another 14 years.
I'll be happy if I live 100.
You have to have a positive attitude. Are you religious?
To a certain extent, yes. I'm a religious man that I believe in our Lord God Almighty. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in a heaven and hell. I don't go to church. I have been disoriented, disenchanted by the churches, and I refuse to go. But I pray to my Lord, I read my Bible, and I try to do the right thing by mankind.
What do you believe happens after a person passes?
After what?
After a person passes away, what do you believe happens?
Well, I believe the soul is preserved by Him above. I don't actually believe in a hell. I do believe there's a heaven. I do believe there's peace ever after. And that's about all I can say about it.
Do you think, is it like an afterlife? Like, is it like our world but different?
Other than the soul being preserved, no.
Aren't you scared?
Huh?
Aren't you scared?
No, because I believe that we all have to die, and whatever happens, happens. I do believe the soul is preserved by Him above, but that's my belief. Now, people may say I'm nuts,
No.
but I don't care.
I like to ask the veterans that because, you know, everyone has their own beliefs, and it's
Yeah.
important to try to understand what other people believe. Because if you think that you know everything, you don't.
No.
You have to talk to other people.
That's right.
What kind of person do you want your friends and family to remember you as, Mr. Hall?
As a person who did his best to be a good person, help other people, love his country, fight for it if necessary, and remember that I did fight for it.
What can the younger generations do to make the sacrifices that your generation fought for and that your generation made? What can we do to make it worth it?
Well, that comes back to education again. That comes back to the history of this country and the history of how it was formed, how it was ran, how the Constitution was written, what it means. Study it. And do not try to make any technical changes in it, like some people are trying to do today.
When I was a senior in high school, I did a survey of 75 of my schoolmates, and I asked them, when was the attack on Pearl Harbor? 75 18-year-olds. Not one knew.
That's
December
right.
7th, 1941.
That's right.
And it's only been 75 years. That's not a long time.
No,
Um,
but you ask them about a riot,
they'll
a protest, they know about that. On December the 7th, 1941, I and another medic were picking up wounded. And as we approached all the wounded on the parade ground, I noticed this one man that had a .45 automatic on his hip. And I rolled him over on his back, and his intestines fell out of his stomach onto the ground. It was a very disturbing moment in my life. But he had this .45 on his automatic pistol on him. He did not need it, he was dead. So I retrieved the pistol as my own weapon, as I did not have one that day. And I kept that pistol for the rest of the war. I never cleaned the belt or the holster. I left it for that blood to dry, and I kept it as a memory of a horrible day of all the strafing and all of the wounded that were around me at that particular moment.
How old were you?
I was 18 years old at that time.
And you were picking up these wounded men. What was it like being under fire, but still trying to find wounded men to help?
That's kind of a hard question to answer, because when you're involved in any kind of a project, you don't notice too much of what's going on around you. All you do is hear the sounds of explosions, and I have to say the wounded, some of them screaming, crying. It was a horrible thing to go through, but it was something that I had to do. We all had to do it. All of the people that were involved in trying to repel the attack and rescue and service the wounded. The dead we didn't worry too much about, because they were not able to be helped. Although there was a lot of sorrow, and I guess there was some fear, but as I said a moment ago, you're too busy to be scared at that moment. The only time you're scared is when something happens close to you, and then you're really not that scared. It's hard to explain, but when terror is around, I guess there is fear, but somehow you don't feel it.
Thank you for explaining that. You had mentioned that this particular man, who you had tried to save but was dead, that really sticks in your mind.
Oh, absolutely.
But you picked up many wounded men that day. Could you give the students, or could you give people an idea, what were the variations of wounds that you witnessed?
Well, about all you could do is pick up a wounded and look at him and see where his wound was, and you could say to yourself, oh boy, this guy's in bad shape, or he's not too bad, we can take care of this one. And that's about the way it went. But as I said before, you don't really pay too much attention of what's going on around you. And you try not to think too much about how bad is he hurt. Just get him help.
Any of the wounded men that you had helped, did you guys give any first aid to them, or you just took them straight to the hospital?
No, we just took them straight to the hospital.
Were there medics giving first aid on the parade ground itself, or were they all just taking the men to the hospital?
No, there were some people trying to give first aid. That's hard to explain who was doing what, but there was people running around all over the place trying to help. But my partner and I, we were the only ones that had transportation.
That man who you turned over on the back, that was the most serious wound that you encountered, you would say?
Well, yeah, that was the most horrible wound I saw. Yes.
And so you took the 45. Was the 45 was in his was in the belt?
Yeah.
And is this a leather belt? What is it?
No, it was what we call web belt. It was canvas, and it was kind of woven, if you wanted to. It was like little small ropes that were wound together into a wide belt.
And did you know the man at all?
No. Nope, never seen him before.
But you believe he was an officer, right?
Oh, he was, definitely.
Oh, because he had the 45.
And he had the bars on his shoulder, so I knew he was an officer. As I said before, he was either a first or a second lieutenant, and I think he was a first, but I'm not sure.
On the Oklahoma, the USS Oklahoma, I'm sure you know that after the attack, those men were trapped in
Yeah.
there. You were at Hickam Field for the days after. Was that a big source of, were a lot of the men talking about the guys trapped in the Oklahoma?
You know, I didn't know anything about that until maybe 3 or 4 days later. And they had pictures in the paper of it. That's when I found out about it. And actually, that's when I found out that what I saw in that horrible explosion was the Arizona. That's how I found out about that. And then I realized that big explosion I saw was the Arizona. So,
Did the fires go into the night, or by the nighttime of December 7th were all the fires put out?
no, those fires burned, no, I don't know how many days. But I know those fires lasted for at least 2 days, maybe a week.
Wow.
I just don't remember.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of.
You know, the things that happened to me are fairly easy to remember, but things that I read about or things that I do know about, I didn't see. I just know about them. So, and some of the things I've said here, like I said about the hangars at Hickam, I'm sure there was supposed to be more hangars made, but I'm not sure that that's as true. But I'm pretty positive of it.
It would make sense. It would make sense.
Yeah.
For there to be, after Pearl Harbor, your adrenaline, is all the way up there. All the days after Pearl Harbor, it must have been hard to get back, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
To what we call normal?
Yeah.
No way. No way.
I mean, you were stationed at Hickam Field for quite a while after the attack.
Oh, yeah.
How long would you say it took for things to get to any sort of normal after the attack?
Oh, I'd say things probably started to settle down pretty good after about 30 days.
Now, when did you hear about the war being declared? Because, as far as you knew, it was just the attack. Did you realize that meant war instantly?
I think from what we heard was probably, I guess some of the guys were talking about it on the night of the 8th. And of course the newspapers on the 9th, they had the story. So, well, we knew war was going to be declared. There was no question about that.
What were your thoughts towards the Japanese? Not the Japanese in Hawaii, but the actual Japanese.
Oh, we hated all of them now. We were leery of the Japanese that were living in Hawaii. We didn't know what might happen. But nothing did. And everything was fine.
And my final thing for you, sir, is we call it the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
That's what it's referred to as in history. But what do you all actually call it in the days after the attack? What did you refer refer the attack to as?
Well, I guess the whole paper started it. They talked about the attack on Pearl Harbor. They never mentioned too much about the other bases until much later. And then in 1958, I believe it was, the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association was founded. Now, I belonged to the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, or I did until it was dissolved 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe more. The thing of it is, in order to become a member of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, you had to be on the island of Oahu or within a 3-mile radius in the ocean. Like the SS Ward that depth charged that submarine. Now they were within 3 miles, so they were eligible to join the organization. So even though you were Army, Marine, Navy, or whatever, you were present there when that attack happened. You're eligible to become a member of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. That is why, even though I was stationed at Hickam Field and I was Army Air Corps, I am a member of what is left of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. So when they talk about the attack on Pearl Harbor, they're talking about the attack on Hickam.
Yeah, the whole thing.
The whole thing. Everything on the island.
And my only thing for you now, sir, is from Hickam Field, you can see Battleship Row pretty clearly, correct?
Well, let me put that another way. You can look over and you can see the area. You may not be able to see a battleship. It would depend on what part of the Hickam Field you're on. Now, Hickam Field, I'll give you an example. The Officers Club at Hickam Field, this is the harbor entrance of Pearl Harbor. This piece right here is Hickam Field, and the Officers Club is right there. Now the line runs down this way, and it kind of curves a little bit. This is all Pearl Harbor. This is all Hickam.
So you could be at the edge of Hickam and be farther away.
Yeah.
But when you did get up to see Battleship Row on Pearl Harbor on December 7th or on one of the following days, I mean, obviously the Arizona was in the water, but the other ships, besides being on fire, I mean, were they all in different states of destruction, or?
Well, I would imagine so. I didn't see them, so I don't know. But no, I never looked to see if there was any damage. If I did happen to look that way, I sure didn't see any. Because where I usually was, it was too far away to see any detail of Pearl Harbor. If I wanted to see anything of Pearl Harbor, I had to go over to the line where the line separated the two. And I could stand there. As a matter of fact, we had the post nursery, the shrubbery and stuff. It was over there on the bank of Pearl Harbor. And so I had to go in there every now and then. And I could sit there in my truck and I could look out and see the water. And here comes a fleet. They're going out. Or maybe a submarine going out, or a submarine coming in. You could see that. But in the center of Hickam Field, no, you couldn't see Pearl Harbor.
I appreciate your honesty. It's better than you making up a whole story of, there are people who do that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm glad that you can tell me the truth.
Yeah.
That's it. I think you have me all out of questions.
I hope so.
I hope it wasn't too bad, but I really appreciate you taking all the time, and I just want you to know that if it wasn't for the service of people like you, people like me would not be here, and I truly appreciate that, and I'm just so grateful for the service of you and all the other men who were there, in the war. You guys,
Yeah.
You saved the world.
We did our part. Now I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.